You know that feeling when the person you share a life with suddenly feels like a stranger? When the silences in the room are heavier than any fight could be. That was my life with Mark. We were that couple, the one everyone envied, the one that looked like it had been ripped from the pages of a fairy tale. But I was about to discover that the most terrifying monsters don't live under your bed. They sleep right next to you, hiding behind a smile. It started in the bathroom, of all places. The most mundane room in our beautiful apartment. I was just looking for a bobby pin, the kind of mindless search you do 100 times a day. My hand brushed against a loose tile behind the toilet. It moved. My heart did a little stutter step, a ridiculous reaction to a simple maintenance issue, but when I pulled it out, I didn't find a leaky pipe. I found a phone. A cheap burner phone, the kind you see in movies, not in the life of a man who wears a suit to work every day. It was a black brick of secrets, and it felt heavier than any object had a right to be. My first instinct was to put it back, to pretend I hadn't seen it, to preserve the perfect picture of our life. But curiosity, that cruel mistress, had already sunk its claws into me. My name's Kayla, and I was living in a beautiful lie. Mark was a successful architect, with a smile that could charm the birds from the trees. We were the golden couple of our friend group, the ones who had it all figured out. We traveled, we laughed, we planned a future filled with kids and a house with a white picket fence. I felt so incredibly safe, anchored to a man I thought I knew down to his very soul. The first red flag wasn't a fight, it was a feeling. A whisper of unease that started in my gut. He'd been coming home later, his excuses always just a little too perfect. He'd say he was swamped with a project, but the look in his eyes was distracted, and the expensive cologne he wore wasn't the one I bought him. I dismissed it as stress, but the feeling of being watched from within my own life began to grow. The mystery of the phone began to consume me. It was a silent oracle, and I was terrified to ask it a question. Every time Mark was in the shower, my fingers itched to go back to that bathroom tile. Who was he talking to? What was so important it had to be hidden in the walls of our home? It turned our apartment into a crime scene, and I felt like a detective in my own life, searching for clues I was terrified to find. The emotional conflict was a war inside my head. One part of me screamed to confront him, to flush the phone down the toilet and scream until he told me the truth. But another part, a quieter, more desperate part, begged me to stay silent. If I found out the truth, if I shattered the perfect illusion, would I ever be able to put it back together? Would I even want to? The weight of that choice was suffocating. The suspense was a constant, humming vibration in my bones. I'd watch him sleep, his face so peaceful and familiar, and I'd wonder what was going on behind those closed eyelids. I became a phantom in my own home, moving through rooms, checking for other hiding places. I found nothing, which was almost worse. It made the phone feel like a magnet, pulling me back to it, promising answers that I knew I wouldn't like. And then came the text. I couldn't help myself. I charged the burner phone and a single notification lit up the screen. It wasn't a name, just a number. The message was a picture of a child, a little girl with the same bright blue eyes as my husband. Beneath it, the text read, "Daddy, why did you leave Mommy? I miss you." The world as I knew it didn't just tilt, it shattered into a million pieces. The emotional climax wasn't a screaming match. It was a quiet whisper. That night, I just handed Mark the phone. I didn't say a word. I watched as the color drained from his face, as the carefully constructed mask of a perfect husband fell away. He didn't deny it. He just sat there, a man undone, a stranger wearing the skin of the man I loved. In that silence, our entire marriage died. The resolution was the hardest part. It was a slow, agonizing crawl out of the wreckage. I learned that the little girl was from an affair he'd had years ago, before we were even engaged. He had been sending money, leading a second life as a father, hiding it from me because he was a coward. The betrayal wasn't just the secret. It was the lie of our foundation. I realized the man I loved wasn't real. He was just a character he'd created. The powerful ending wasn't about anger. it was about acceptance. I packed my bags, leaving the keys to the apartment and the wedding ring on the kitchen counter. I walked out the door and into a world that was terrifying but honest. I cried for a week straight, and I still get a pang in my chest when I see a family in the park. But I survived. I rebuilt myself from the rubble of that secret phone. The first few months after leaving were a blur of pain and confusion. My family and friends were supportive, but they couldn't understand the depth of the betrayal. I found myself questioning my own judgment, my own reality. How could I have been so blind? It was a lesson in how easily we can project our own desires onto someone else, creating a love story they are secretly writing a different ending to. I eventually started therapy, a process that was both terrifying and liberating. My therapist told me that the phone was a physical manifestation of a barrier Mark had built between us. It wasn't just a piece of technology. It was a symbol of a separate life, a secret identity he maintained because he was too afraid to be vulnerable with me. It forced me to look inward and ask why I had accepted so little. I didn't just lose a husband, I lost the future we had planned. The image of a nursery, the sound of our children laughing, the idea of growing old with someone, it all turned to ash. Grief isn't just about missing someone, it's about mourning the person you used to be. I had to grieve the confident, trusting Kayla, because she was gone, replaced by a woman who was skeptical and guarded. The hardest part was explaining it to myself. For months, I replayed our entire relationship in my head, looking for the signs I had missed. Were there other burner phones I never found? Were there lies hidden in his everyday smiles? It was a maddening game, trying to solve a puzzle that didn't have a solution. The truth was, the man I knew and the man he was were two completely different people. I began to realize that his secret wasn't just an affair, it was a pattern of deception. He had built our entire marriage on a foundation that was hollow. He had the child, the other life, and he had made a conscious choice, every single day, to never tell me. It wasn't a mistake, it was a deliberate manipulation of my reality. That realization was the final nail in the coffin of my love for him. 6 months later, I ran into him at a coffee shop. He looked tired, older. He tried to talk to me, to explain, but I saw the little girl's face again, the one who was just as much a victim as I was. I realized I wasn't angry anymore, I just felt pity. Pity for a man so broken he had to hide behind a mask, and pity for the woman who had worn her own mask of contentment. The divorce was a formality. By the time it was over, I had already emotionally divorced him months ago. The lawyers, the papers, the division of assets, it was all just paperwork for a death that had already occurred. It was the final chapter in a book I wished I had never read, a book I wish I had just left on the shelf when I had the chance. It took a long time, but I eventually started dating again. I was terrified, hypervigilant to the point of paranoia. I'd check their phones, look for signs of deception in their stories. It wasn't fair to them, but it was a survival mechanism. The ghost of Mark and his secret phone haunted me. It was a constant reminder that you can never truly know what's in another person's heart. Then I met David. He was patient, kind, and unfailingly open. He didn't hide his phone, he'd leave it out on the counter. He'd tell me about his day without me asking, and he never flinched when I needed reassurance. His honesty was intoxicating, like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocating on lies. He helped me realize that Mark's betrayal was his flaw, not a reflection of my worth. David taught me how to trust again, slowly. He taught me that true intimacy isn't just about passion or shared interests, it's about vulnerability. It's about being okay with being seen, flaws and all. He wanted to see all of me, and he didn't run away. He taught me that the real thing doesn't have to be hidden behind a loose tile in the bathroom. It's out in the open, messy and real. I realized the story of the secret phone wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the strength it took to leave. It's easy to stay in a comfortable lie, but it takes true courage to walk away from it and embrace the terrifying unknown. I had to learn that being alone is infinitely better than being with someone who makes you feel lonely. I had to learn to trust my own instincts again. The experience fundamentally changed me. I'm no longer the naive girl who believed in fairy tales, but I'm also not the bitter woman I became in the immediate aftermath. I'm stronger, more resilient. I have a quiet confidence in my own ability to survive. I know the red flags now, and I refuse to ignore them. I value honesty above all else, because I know the devastating price of its absence. I don't hate Mark anymore. I actually feel sorry for him. Imagine carrying a secret like that for years, the constant fear of exposure, the weight of living a double life. He was a prisoner of his own making, and while he broke my heart, he was the one who had to live with the chains. I was just a casualty of a war he was waging against himself. David and I are married now, a fact that still surprises me sometimes. We have a beautiful, simple life. There are no hidden phones, no secret bank accounts. Just trust and a shared commitment to being honest with each other. It's a foundation built on a mountain of truth, not a house of cards built on a lie. He doesn't fill my life with excitement. He fills it with peaceful certainty. It's funny how the things that break you can also be the things that remake you. The day I found that phone, I thought my life was over. But it was just the beginning of a life I didn't know I was capable of living. A life where I wasn't a character in someone else's story, but the author of my own. A life where the only secrets I keep are the ones that make a good story for my grandkids. If you're living with a secret or feeling that nagging sense of unease, please trust it. Listen to that little voice whispering in your ear. It's the voice of your own survival. You are stronger than you think, and you are worthy of a love that is not just said but shown. Don't be afraid to look behind the loose tile of your own life, no matter what you're afraid you might find. The girl I was would have stayed. She would have pretended everything was fine. But the woman I am now knows that love isn't finding someone to complete you, it's finding someone who accepts you completely, and who you can accept the same way. And sometimes, the first person you need to be honest with is yourself. Because your peace is worth more than any lie they can tell you,